I hope you've given that a good go, and now I'm going to run through the solution with you. Here I've got those 3 links open, and they're all documentation on W3 Schools for different methods in Python. The first one is a method called readLines. It's really important that you have that S because there's also another method called readLine, the singular form. What readLines does is it returns all the lines in the file as a list where each line is an item in the list object. For example, we can run this example and you can see that inside this demo file readLines, there's several lines in that file, and each line after running this method gets added as an item inside a list, like this. Now, the next method I showed you is the Python string replace method. And what this method does is it will replace a specified phrase with another specified phrase. If the starting text was I like bananas and you do text.replace, you can replace the part where it says bananas with apples. And when you print, you can see the end outcome changes that text to I like apples. Now, the final method that I showed you is the string strip method. And what this does is it will remove the spaces at the beginning and at the end of the string. So if our starting text has a lot of white space at the beginning and the end, and then we do text.strip, it'll get rid of all of that extra space and it ends up with just the word. Now, if you have a space in between another word, like this, if we hit run, then you can see that it keeps the space in between the words, but it gets rid of any spaces on either side, which is really, really handy. And you're going to see, hopefully, why it's really, really useful. So now that we've reviewed these 3 methods that we haven't seen before, and normally you would probably find these when you actually get stuck and when you're searching Stack Overflow. But now that you're aware of those methods, let's go ahead and create a letter using our starting letter.docx. So I'm going to go ahead and delete everything in here. And now let's go ahead and tackle this challenge. So the first thing I want to do is to get hold of all of the invited names, and I want to turn them into a list. Now I can, of course, rather tediously go and add some square brackets, add some quotation marks around it, and then add it into my main.py, but I don't want to do that. Instead, I'm going to get Python to read the file. So using our classic syntax with open, I'm going to open up that file. But in order to open it up, I need to specify a string, which is going to be the path that leads me from here to here. So let's think about how we might get there. Now, this input-output folder is on the same hierarchical level as our current file where we're writing our code. If we want to use a relative file path, we can simply say go into the current folder, which is mail merge project start, and then find a folder called input. Inside this folder called input, we're going to go to another folder called names. And then inside that folder of names, we're going to get hold of that file called invitednames.txt. And PyCharm is super clever and it helps you out with a lot of typing, so it saves you some time as well. And then I'm going to save it as names file. Now that I've got this file open, I'm going to go ahead and read it. So namesfile.read. And once I've read it, I'm going to save it to a variable called names, and then I'm going to print out my names. So now if I go ahead and hit run my main.py, you can see that it prints out all of these names individually because it's getting hold of everything that's in here and just printing it out. Now at this point, I would really like these names to be in the format of a list. So if you remember, that's where this readLines method is going to be really helpful because it returns a list containing each line inside the file as a list item. Now, instead of saying namesfile.read, let's replace that with readLines. Now, when I hit run, you can see it prints out names, and names is now magically turned into a list. So now that we have our list of names, which we've extracted from our invitednames.txt, then we can go ahead and proceed to the next step where we're going to replace this placeholder in our starting letter with each of these names. Let's go ahead and create a constant at the top, which I'll call placeholder, and I'm going to set it as the string, which is the square brackets and then the word name, because this is the string that we want to replace from our starting letter. The next step is to open up our starting letter. So again, I'm going to use open, and then I'm going to specify the path. So from here, I'm going to go into the folder that's at the same level as this file. So using the /, and then I'm going to go into input again, and then I'm going to go into, instead of names, I'm going to go to letters. And I'm going to get hold of my starting letter.docx. And I'm going to open this as the letter file. With the letter file, I'm simply just going to get hold of the letter contents by saying letterfile.read. And this is going to be a normal read because I want all of the content inside that letter. And it's now going to be saved as a string inside my letter contents. The next step is to go through the letter contents and replace that placeholder with the actual name that we've got in our list. To do that, we'll need the second method that I showed you, which is the replace method. So we can get hold of the text, call replace, and then the output of this method will be a new string which has modified this text. In our case, we'll need a loop. So we can say for name in our list of names, let's go through each of the names in that list. And then let's get the letter contents and replace the placeholder, so the old string, with a new string, which is going to be the name. And once we've replaced it, then we're going to save it into a new letter. Now that we have our new letter, let's go ahead and print it out and see what it looks like. So you can see all the contents of each of the letters being printed. But other than the very last letter that looks pretty normal, every other letter has a new line after the name. So remember when we printed out each of these names, you can see that after each of the names that they've extracted from this list of invited names, there's a new line that's being added. And you can see that with this \n. The only one that doesn't have a new line is the very last one. What we need to do is to strip the new line. Does that remind you of something? Well, we have a method that we saw called strip, which can take away any of the spaces at the beginning and at the end of the string. And then we can end up with an output, which is the string without any of those leading and trailing spaces. We're going to loop through each of the names, and then we're going to take the name and we're going to call strip on each of those names. And then we can save it to a variable called stripped name. And now we can use that stripped name instead of the name. Now, if I go ahead and print out our new letter, you can see that each of the letters look exactly like how we want them to be. All we need to do now is to write them into a new file. In previous lessons, I mentioned that when you open a file that doesn't exist, Python will actually create that file for you. Again, using our with open, I'm going to navigate to this ready to send folder. Going from where we are in main.py, we're going to go to the output folder, and then we're going to go to the ready to send folder. And then inside the ready to send folder is where we're going to create our new file. So let's think about what we want our file name to look like. In the intro, I showed you this is the format for each of the files. letter_for_ang.docx. And then this part is replaced by each of the names. So let's write that letter_for_ the name and then .docx. We can use an F string to replace this part with the stripped name. So now we should be creating a new letter for each of the names in our list of names. And those letters are going to have the file name letter for the name .docx. So now let's refer to this file as the completed letter. What we want to do with this completed letter, which at the moment is blank, is we want to write to it. So to do that, we have to change the open mode from default, which is R for read, to W for write. And this will allow us to get our completed letter and write to it. What do we want to write in there? Well, we want to write the new letter that we've created, of course. That's pretty much the end of our code. And all we have to do is to go ahead and hit run. And once I hit run, you can see there's a whole bunch of letters that have been generated over here. And if I click on each of them, you can see that the name placeholder has now been replaced. And I'm now ready to go to the printers and print all of these out. So did you manage to figure out how to complete this project? If not, be sure to review the relevant parts of the lessons today so that you're really confident with what's going on and you understand all of this code. If you want to take a look at the completed solution, then head over to the course resources and you'll find a link to the final project code, which actually works even within Replit. So you can delete all of these files and you can see it generate them from scratch.